Okay. So you want to know why I don't do security work anymore? Pull up a chair, man. Get another round. This is going to take a while, and I need you to just let me talk. Because every time I've tried to tell this story, I start second-guessing myself halfway through, and then I just stop. And I don't want to stop this time. I want to get it all out. Every bit of it. So, you know how bad things got for me after the divorce. You were there for some of it. But you weren't there for the really bad part. The part I didn't tell anyone. And that was about 4, maybe 5 months after Sandra took the kids. And I was still sleeping in the F-150 down by the river road. Because the apartment I'd lined up fell through when my credit check came back. And the landlord basically laughed at me over the phone. Like, actually laughed. Said, "Good luck, buddy." Click. That kind of broke. I was eating gas station burritos for dinner. Every night. The ones that sit in the little heated rotating case all day. And by the time I got to them around 9 or 10 at night, they had this skin on them. This weird, dry skin. And I was still eating them because they were $1.89. And I could get 2 for under $4. And that was dinner. I had $19 and some change in my checking account, and about $60 cash. I was rationing like it was water in a desert. And every single morning I woke up in that truck with the windows all fogged up and my back bent sideways from the seat. And I just laid there for a few minutes, thinking, okay, you are not dead. That's something. That's where I was at, man. Just not dead being a win. My phone still worked because I hadn't missed that bill yet. Barely. And I was checking job boards constantly. Like obsessively. Indeed. Craigslist. This local Facebook group for odd jobs. Everything. I applied to warehouse work, overnight stocking at a grocery chain, loading docks, anything that was nights, because I figured nights paid a little more. And also, if I was working nights, then the truck being my bedroom was less of a problem, since I wouldn't need to sleep in it until morning, when the sun came up and it got warm enough that it wasn't miserable. I'd put in maybe 40 applications in 3 weeks and heard back from 2 of them, and both of those fell apart before I even got started. One was a roofing crew that wanted me to bring my own tools, and I didn't have tools anymore because Sandra's lawyer got creative with the asset list. The other one was a restaurant supply warehouse that called me back, and then, when I showed up for the first day of orientation, they said there'd been a hiring freeze and sent me home. I sat in the parking lot of that warehouse for about 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. I didn't even feel anything. I was just so far past the point of feeling things that I sat there blank, and then I drove to the river road and ate a burrito and went to sleep. The posting for the World Cup venue security gig, I saw it on a Friday night. And look, I know the title of this story sounds like I was some kind of official staff member with a uniform and a badge and a radio, and I sort of was. But let me back up and explain how it actually came together, because it wasn't as clean as it sounds. The stadium, and I'm not going to say the name, but you know the one? The big one they retrofitted for the tournament. The one with the weird new wing they built fast, and everybody said, cut corners. They were pulling in contract security through a third-party firm. The firm had a posting on Craigslist of all places, just sitting there between ads for someone selling a used treadmill, and a guy looking for a roommate who said up front that he did not tolerate dishes into the sink. The security posting said something like, large venue, overnight positions, strong candidates with any prior experience preferred, competitive hourly, apply with resume and 2 references. Competitive hourly. That was the phrase that got me. I didn't even finish reading. I just applied right there in the truck, with my phone screen cracked down the middle and the autocorrect going haywire on me. And I just sent it. And then I sat there telling myself not to hope. Don't hope. You hope and it doesn't work out, and that's worse than not hoping. So I didn't hope. I just sent it and went to sleep. 3 days later, a number I didn't recognize called me, and I almost didn't pick up because, like I said, I'd stopped answering numbers I didn't know because it was usually collections, or that one guy from the roofing crew calling to ask again if I had my own tools. But something made me pick up. I don't know what. Something. And the guy on the other end said he was calling from Gray Line event staffing, and did I still want to interview for the overnight security contract at the stadium? And I said yes, so fast, I probably sounded insane. The interview was at 9 at night, which I thought was a little strange, but the guy explained they were doing all their screening during off-peak hours because the stadium itself was being used for daytime prep and setup for the tournament, and there were crews working all day, and the management wanted the security screening done separately and quietly. Those were his words. Quietly. I thought, okay, a little odd, but okay. I drove there with the gas light on, and I had about $4 in my pocket, and I was wearing the one clean button-down I still owned, which I'd hung in the truck cab on the little hook above the back window specifically so it wouldn't get too wrinkled. I'd shined my shoes using a paper towel and a little bit of the hand lotion I kept in the glove box. You do what you can. You do what you can, man. The main entrance of the stadium at 9 at night is a different thing than it is in the daytime. I'd been there once for a regular season match about 2 years before, back when life was different. And during the day, it's all open plazas and food stands and people and noise. At 9 at night, it was this big, dark shape sitting on the edge of the parking lot, with maybe 8 or 10 work lights scattered around where construction crews had been going during the day, and everything was quiet. And there was a little wind coming off the flat ground around it that smelled like cut concrete dust and diesel. A security guard I didn't know let me in through a side door and walked me through what felt like a service corridor. Not the fancy part, the back part. And he didn't say anything the whole walk, just led me down one hallway and then another, and then down a short flight of stairs to a room that had a folding table in it and fluorescent lights and 2 chairs. And that was it. The woman sitting at the table was the one they'd told me on the phone to ask for. Her name was, and I wrote it down later, so I remember it exactly, Carla Pitts. She was in her 40s maybe, kind of tired looking, wearing a Gray Line staff jacket and had a folder in front of her, and a plastic cup of coffee. And she stood up when I came in and shook my hand, and her grip was solid, like a real handshake, which I respected. She asked me the usual stuff. Prior security experience, which I had a little of from a stint at a parking garage 2 years back. Any issues with overnight shifts, which I said no to. Any physical limitations, which no. Any problems with confined spaces or working alone for extended periods. And I said no. No problems. Looking back, I should have thought more about that last question. Any problems working alone for extended periods? That is not a normal interview question. But I was focused on getting the job, and I said no. And she wrote something down and nodded. The pay was $22 an hour. Nights. 6 nights a week through the end of the tournament. When she said that number, I kept my face completely still, because I'd trained myself in that interview not to look too desperate, even though inside my whole chest lit up, and I was doing the math. 22 times 8 hours times 6 nights. That's over $1,000 a week, and I'd been living on $60 cash for 2 weeks. So yeah, I kept my face still, but every part of me was screaming. She had me sign about 6 different forms, liability stuff mostly, and one of them had language about a confidentiality agreement related to venue security protocols. And I signed it without reading it all the way through, because I was getting the job. I could feel it, and I didn't want to slow anything down. She gave me a badge on a lanyard. Gray Line Event Security. My name printed on it already like they'd known I was coming, which I guess they had. and a radio on a charging clip, and told me to report to a guy named Brent in Sector 7 for my first shift orientation. She said she'd radio ahead to let him know I was coming. Brent was nothing like her. Brent was this tall, loose-jointed guy in his late 20s who seemed like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. He did my orientation in about 12 minutes, showed me the patrol routes on a laminated map, showed me where the break room was and where the bathroom was and where the security office was, and basically said, "Look, man, it's a big, empty building at night. Nothing happens. You walk your route, you radio in every hour. You don't let anyone in who doesn't have credentials. That's it. Easy money." He said easy money. He actually said that. And I remember thinking, okay, easy money. I can do easy money. The first 2 weeks were fine. No, fine's not right. They were boring. Beautifully, wonderfully boring. The patrol route took me through the main concourse level and down into the service corridors under the seating bowl, and back up through the new West Wing, and then looping back. The building at 2 in the morning was just empty, vast and dim, and smelling like new paint in some places, and old building in others, and completely, totally empty. I started feeling like a person again around week 1. I had a real place to sleep. I found a weekly motel that was $60 a night, and I paid for a week up front, and walked into that little room with the bad carpet and the tiny TV, and I stood there for a second, just feeling the floor under my feet and the walls around me, and I almost lost it. I didn't, but almost. I was eating real meals. I stopped thinking about Sandra every night. I started thinking maybe this thing could level out. Maybe I could get right. I was doing my routes, clocking in clean, staying awake, doing the job. Brent didn't bother me much. Carla Pitts never came back after that first night. It was basically just me and the building. And then it was around the beginning of week 3 when the new supervisor started. And that's where I need to slow down, because everything that happened after is connected to him, or to who he seemed to be at first, and to what got handed to me, and to the rules. His name on his badge said D. Farrow. He showed up on a Tuesday, my 3rd week in, and he did a walkthrough with me that night that was different from the walks Brent had done. Brent walked like a guy who wanted to get it over with. Farrow walked like he was listening to the building. Slow, stopping, tilting his head sometimes in the corridors like he heard something I didn't. He asked me about my routes. He asked specifically about the lower service levels, below the concourse, the access corridors under the field. And when I told him my route didn't take me down there, he just nodded and didn't say anything. And I remember thinking it was a weird reaction, but not weird enough to say anything about. At the end of that walk, he handed me a laminated card, slid it out of his jacket pocket like he'd been carrying it around. He said, "Stadium management asked me to give all the overnight staff a copy of this, updated venue protocols." He said it casually like it was nothing, like he was handing me a lunch menu. And then he walked off toward the elevator, and I stood there holding it under a work light, and I read it. It was a list. 12 items. Numbered clean and printed in that plain computer font, like someone had made it quickly and laminated fast. And the laminate had a little bubble in the top corner like it had been done with a cheap home machine. I read it standing there in the corridor, and most of it was normal stuff. Don't prop open external doors. Radio in every 60 minutes on the dot. Do not access the east stairwell after midnight without a second officer present. Normal stuff. Seemed normal. I folded it into my jacket pocket and kept going. That was a Tuesday. By the following Sunday, everything was different, and I was never the same after it, and I'll tell you exactly why. But I need another minute, because my mouth is dry, and I need another sip, and I need you to understand who I was going into this. how beat down, and how grateful, and how willing I was to just put my head down and work and not ask questions, because that's important. That willingness to not ask questions. That's the thing that almost got me killed. So the shift I want to tell you about, the one where everything started going sideways, was a Thursday, middle of my 3rd week. Nothing special about the night coming in, nothing that felt different. Just me pulling into the lot in the F-150 around 10:15, badge clipped to my jacket, coffee in a travel mug from the gas station across the street. The same one I stopped at every night on the way in because they had decent enough coffee for $1.50, and the lady behind the counter, older woman named Deb, she always just nodded at me when I came in, like we had an understanding. 2 guys doing the night shift thing, keeping the lights on. She never asked me anything, and I never asked her anything, and it was maybe the most comfortable relationship I had at that point in my life, which is a sad thing to say, but there it is. I signed in at the security desk just inside the main service entrance, logged my start time, grabbed the updated patrol sheet from the little plastic tray Pharaoh had started leaving for us, and did my first loop of the concourse level. That took about 40 minutes at a normal pace. The concourse at night was this long, curving hallway that went all the way around the bowl, and it had these big roll-down metal gates in front of the food stands and vendor spots, and the lights were on these automatic dimmers that brought them down to about 30% after 11, and it gave the whole place this weird amber glow like the inside of a fish tank. I'd gotten used to it. It stopped feeling weird after the first week. It was just the concourse at night, amber and quiet and smelling like stale popcorn and floor cleaner. After the concourse, I did the West Wing, which was the new construction side, the part they'd built fast, and that still had this chemical smell like fresh sealant that caught in the back of your throat if you breathed too deep. There were areas in the West Wing that were still technically off-limits to overnight staff, blocked off with those orange plastic construction barriers and yellow tape, and I'd always just walked past those sections without thinking much about what was behind them. Work in progress, stadium stuff, none of my business. After the West Wing, I was supposed to head down to the service level below the concourse for a quick check. Not the deep levels, just the first one down. Service level 1, they called it on the map. It had the main mechanical rooms and some storage in the loading dock access, and it was a wide, low-ceilinged space with pipes running overhead, and the floor was bare concrete, and the lights down there were those industrial strip lights that hummed. I hated that hum. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of sound that you couldn't stop hearing once you noticed it. Like, once your brain found it, it just kept finding it over and over. Okay, so I did service level 1, and it was fine. Nothing out of place. Just the usual hum and the smell of old concrete, and a little bit of standing water near the drain by the loading dock that was always there, no matter how many times I reported it. Then I was supposed to come back up and do my first radio check and take a break. And that's where I changed things up a little. Not a big change, just a small one that I didn't even think about at the time, but that I've thought about almost every day since. Instead of going straight back up to the concourse, I decided to check out the supply area down the hall from the main mechanical room. Brent had mentioned it during orientation, said there were cleaning supplies and some extra equipment stored down there, and if I ever needed anything, paper towels, spare radio batteries, whatever, that's where to look. I'd never actually gone in there, but that night, for some reason, I thought I'd just take a look, just see what was in there. Nothing more than that. The supply room door was one of those heavy metal institutional doors with a push-bar handle and a little wire glass window set into it at eye level. The window was filmed over with dust on the inside, so I couldn't see in before I pushed through. I pushed through, and the smell that hit me was that old cardboard smell, like a storage unit that's been closed up too long, mixed with something chemical, and underneath it all, just the plain old smell of a room that doesn't get used much. There was one bare bulb on a pull chain in the middle of the ceiling, and I pulled it, and the room came up in that yellow bare bulb light. It wasn't much. Metal shelving units along 2 walls, stuff on them in various states of organization, paper towel rolls and cleaning solution jugs and trash bags, and a box of those blue latex gloves and some spray bottles with the labels half peeled off. On the floor, there were a couple of mop buckets and what looked like an old floor buffer that hadn't been used in years, judging by the dust sitting on top of it. There was a card table against the far wall, with a folding chair and some papers on it, and a coffee mug with a dried ring inside it. And I remember thinking, someone used to use this room as a little break spot. Someone used to come down here and sit and have their coffee and be alone for a while. I understood that. I was looking at the shelving, trying to find if there were any spare radio batteries, and that's when I noticed the employee manual. Or what looked like an employee manual. It was on the second shelf from the bottom, wedged sideways between a jug of cleaning solution and a box of garbage bags. And it was one of those cheap 3-ring binders, the kind with the clear plastic cover you can slide a paper into, and the paper inside the cover said, Gray Line Event Staffing, Venue Operations Manual, St. Vale Civic Stadium Complex. Which was fine. Normal thing to have in a supply room. But what caught me was that it was thick, fatter than it should be, like someone had shoved extra pages in there. I pulled it out. It had some weight to it. The cover was smudged, not just dusty, smudged like hands had touched it many times. I set it on the card table and opened it up. The first section was exactly what you'd expect. Patrol procedures, radio protocols, emergency contact numbers, code of conduct, all printed clean on standard paper, standard font. About 40 pages of completely normal stuff that I'd half read during orientation and never thought about again. Then, somewhere around page 45 or 46, I turned a page and everything changed. The printed pages stopped. What came next was handwritten. Not typed and printed, actually handwritten. In pen, in a careful but cramped handwriting like someone was trying to fit too many words into too little space. And the paper was different too. It wasn't the standard white office paper the rest of the manual was printed on. These pages were lined notebook paper, the kind with the blue lines and the red margin line down the left side, the kind you buy at a drugstore in a 3-pack for back to school. Someone had punched holes in these notebook pages and put them in the binder themselves. I stood there looking at the first handwritten page for probably 10 or 15 seconds before I actually read any of it. I was just taking in the fact of it, that someone had done this, put this here, hidden inside the official binder, left in this room that nobody came into. At the top of the first handwritten page it said, and I am going to quote this as close as I can remember, because I have gone over these words in my head so many times since. It said, "If you are reading this, you are already working nights in the lower levels. Do not put this down. Read all of it. Show no one. Follow these in order." Below that it said, "Rules for the lower levels." And then it was numbered. Not 12 items like the laminated card Pharaoh had given me. This one had more. I counted later. There were 19. I want to tell you I thought it was a prank. I really want to tell you that because thinking it was a prank is the reasonable response. And I did think it for a minute. Day shift guys messing around, leaving creepy notes for the night crew. It's the kind of thing bored people do, right? Especially during a long contract job like this, where you're here for weeks and the routine gets stale. I've worked jobs where guys did stuff like that. Left weird notes. Moved stuff around to confuse the incoming shift. Put fake spiders in the break room fridge. People do stupid things when they're bored. So I told myself, this is a prank. Some idiot day shift guy with too much time and a sick sense of humor wrote this up and stuck it in here, and he's probably laughed about it with his buddies a couple times, and then forgotten about it. That's what I told myself. But I kept reading, because I couldn't stop. And the further I read, the less it felt like a prank, and the more it felt like something else. And I can't tell you exactly what that feeling was, except to say it felt like reading something that cost the person who wrote it. Something real. You know how you can tell the difference between somebody joking around and somebody telling you something they genuinely need you to know. There's a weight to the second thing. A kind of weight. That's what this felt like. Let me give you some of the rules. Not all of them. The ones that matter to this story. Rule 1 said, never go below service level 2 alone after midnight. If you have to go below service level 2 after midnight, tell someone on the surface your exact location before you go down. Not over the radio, in person. Tell a person. Rule 2 said the elevator in the east service corridor, and I knew exactly which elevator it meant. There was only one elevator in the east service corridor. It was a big industrial lift for moving equipment between levels. It said that elevators should not be used between the hours of midnight and 4 in the morning. Take the stairs only. Rule 3 said if you hear a dragging sound in any hallway below service level 1, stop moving immediately. Flatten yourself against the wall. Do not use your flashlight. Wait for the sound to stop, and do not move until it has been quiet for at least 2 full minutes. Not 30 seconds. 2 full minutes. Rule 4 said if you are in the elevator and it stops between floors on its own, do not look at the walls. The elevator walls were brushed metal, that kind of industrial metal that's got a slight shine to it, and you could see yourself in it if the light was right, like a foggy dark mirror kind of reflection. Rule 4 said, do not look at the walls. Keep your eyes on the floor or the ceiling. Do not look at the walls. I stopped there for a second, looked up at the bare bulb, thought about the elevator. I'd used it maybe 4 or 5 times since starting the job, mostly to move equipment between levels, and I'd never paid attention to the walls. You don't think about the walls of an elevator, you just stand in it and wait for it to move. But now I was thinking about it, and the walls in that elevator were exactly what the note described. That brushed metal, that foggy reflection. I went back to reading. Rule 5 was about a door at the far end of sub-level 2. Green painted door. Rule 5 said that door is always locked. It said it will sometimes appear to be unlocked. It is not. Do not try the handle. Rule 6 said if your radio stops working below service level 1, go back to the stairs immediately. Do not wait to see if it comes back. Do not radio ahead. Just go to the stairs and go up. Don't wait. Rule 7. Rule 7 was the one that sat in my stomach like a stone. Rule 7 said if you are in the elevator and it stops on its own, and you have not looked at the walls, good. Stay still. But if someone else has already broken Rule 4 and looked at the walls, and if the reflection you see when you finally look is blinking when you are not blinking, get off the elevator on whatever floor the doors open to next. Do not go back to that elevator. Do not take it again that night. The rule said it already knows you saw it. I put the binder down, not slammed it. Just set it down? Carefully, like it might break, or like I might wake something up by being rough with it. And I stood there in that supply room under the bare bulb, and I thought about the fact that I had been using that elevator. I had been using it and not thinking about the walls, and not thinking about anything except what floor I needed. Prank. I told myself again. Prank. Sick, detailed, weirdly specific prank. I kept reading. Rules 8 through 12 were mostly about specific areas I hadn't been to yet, rooms and corridors below service level 2 that weren't on my patrol map, that I had no official reason to go to. There was stuff in those rules about smell and about sound, and about things I don't even want to get into right now, because we're not there yet in the story, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. I did not read rules 13 through 19 that night. Not all of them. I got to 13, and that's when I heard the sound for the first time. And I want to be clear about what I heard. I'm not saying I heard something spooky and dramatic and movie scary. I'm not saying the lights flickered. What I heard was quiet. It was almost nothing. It was coming from somewhere down the hallway outside the supply room, from the direction of the east service corridor, the direction of the elevator, and it was a scratching sound. Not loud, not violent, just a steady, patient scratching. The way a dog scratches at a door when it wants to come in, except lower, slower, and with a weight behind it that a dog doesn't have. I looked at my watch. It was 1:47 in the morning. I stood completely still for I don't know how long, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a full minute. And the scratching continued and then it stopped. Just stopped. Clean stop. No trailing off. Just there. And then not there. And the hallway outside went back to just being the humming of those strip lights and the far-off sound of the building's ventilation doing whatever it does at night. I stood there another full minute doing nothing. Then I picked up the binder. I took out the handwritten pages carefully, all of them, folded them, and put them in my jacket's inside pocket. Put the binder back on the shelf exactly where I found it. Turned off the bare bulb. Walked out of the supply room into the hallway. The hallway was empty. Of course it was empty. It was a hallway in a building at 1:47 in the morning, and it was empty. I stood there and looked toward the east corridor, and the lights down there were doing their normal thing, humming and steady, and I couldn't see anything and I couldn't hear anything. I went upstairs. I did my radio check. I said everything was fine. I sat in the break room for a while with my coffee cooling in my hand and the handwritten pages in my jacket pocket pressing against my chest, and I told myself it was a prank and the scratching was a pipe or a rat or the building settling and everything was fine. I told myself that for about the next hour, right up until I went back down to do my 2 a.m. check of service level 1, and the elevator, the east corridor elevator that I had not called and had not used, made a soft, heavy clunk from somewhere below, like it had moved on its own, like it had gone down a floor without anyone pushing the button. I stood at the top of the service stairs. I listened. The elevator did not make another sound. I took the stairs down. I checked the mechanical room. I checked the loading dock drain. Everything looked fine. Everything looked completely fine. I did not go near the elevator, and I did not sleep worth a damn when I got back to the motel that morning. Just lay there on the bad, carpet-smelling bedspread with the handwritten pages spread out on the nightstand, and the curtain cracked so the morning light came in just enough, and I read rules 13 through 19 in the daylight, because in the daylight I could tell myself it was just a prank. In the daylight, I almost believed it. So I went back the next night. Of course I went back. $22 an hour and a motel room that had 4 walls and a door that locked. And I wasn't going to walk away from that over a scratching sound and some handwritten rules that were probably some kind of joke. That's what I kept telling myself on the drive in. Probably a joke. Probably nothing. Keep your head down and do the job. But I want to be honest with you, because that's the whole point of telling you this. I want to be honest and say that the probably was doing a lot of work in that sentence. Probably a joke. Not definitely. Not obviously. Probably. And there's a canyon between probably And definitely when you're standing in a dim hallway at 1 in the morning, and you're the only person in the building, and the thing you heard the night before didn't sound like a pipe, and didn't sound like a rat, and didn't sound like anything you could fully name and go back to sleep on. I'd read the rules again that morning, all 19 of them. Sitting on the edge of the motel bed with the pages spread out and the daylight coming through the curtain gap, and a gas station coffee going cold on the nightstand. Read them slow. Read them twice. And the thing about the rules, the thing I kept coming back to, was how specific they were. A prank is vague. A prank says, "Ooh, don't go in the basement or something gets you." It's broad because broad is scarier when you're joking around. Broad lets the imagination do the heavy lifting. These rules weren't broad. These rules were specific in a way that felt earned. Like whoever wrote them had learned each one the hard way. Rule 3 didn't say don't make noise. It said flatten yourself against the wall and wait 2 full minutes. Not 30 seconds. 2 full minutes. Who picks 2 minutes if they're making it up? Why not just say, wait a long time? Why 2 minutes specifically, unless 2 minutes is the number that worked? Unless someone counted. That specificity was what I couldn't shake. That and the handwriting itself, which I'd looked at more carefully in the daylight. It wasn't one person's handwriting all the way through. I don't think. The first several rules were in one hand, tight and cramped and pressing hard into the paper. And then around Rule 9 or 10, the pen pressure changed, and the letters got a little looser and slightly larger. And then around Rule 14, it changed again, back to tight, but different tight, different from the first, like a third person had picked up where the second one stopped. 3 different people, adding to the same document, over what might have been a long time. I folded the pages back up and put them in my jacket pocket and drove to work. That night, the Thursday night, I did everything the same as always for the first few hours. Concourse loop, West Wing, radio check. I was on autopilot and my brain was somewhere else, and I kept touching the outside of my jacket pocket to feel the folded pages through the fabric without even realizing I was doing it. Just checking they were still there, like a habit I'd developed overnight. Pharaoh wasn't around. He showed up maybe 3 or 4 nights a week, and this wasn't one of them. The other overnight guy, a kid named Torres, who did the north end, while I did the south and lower levels, was around, but we didn't cross paths much. We'd radio in our checks at the same times, and sometimes overlap in the break room for 10 minutes. But that was about it. I thought about telling Torres about the rules, about the binder, about the scratching. I rehearsed it a couple times in my head while I was walking the concourse. "Hey man, found something weird last night. You want to look at it?" But every time I ran that conversation in my head, it ended with Torres looking at me like I'd lost my mind, or worse, Torres laughing about it, telling Pharaoh, and me looking like the unhinged new guy who was spooked by a handwritten prank. $22 an hour. I kept my mouth shut. Around midnight, I started my first run of the lower service level. Service level 1, same as always. Mechanical room, loading dock, the drain with its permanent puddle, the strip lights humming their one endless note. Nothing different, nothing out of place. I checked my watch more than I normally would have. Checked it constantly, because Rule 2 said the elevator shouldn't be used between midnight and 4, and I'd already been using it without knowing that. And now, I was very aware of the fact that I knew it, and what that meant going forward. The stairs were fine. I was fine with the stairs. The stairs were concrete and solid and had no metal walls and no soft clunking sounds, and I liked them just fine. I came back up, took my break, ate the sandwich I'd brought from the gas station, Deb had given me a little nod and a thumbs up when I'd grabbed it earlier, like she approved of me branching out from the coffee. I sat in the break room, and I was doing okay. I was holding it together. It was 12:40 in the morning, and everything was normal, and the building was just a building, and I was just a guy doing a job. At 1:15, I went back down for the second lower level check of the night. Down the stairs. Service level 1. The mechanical room was fine. The loading dock drain had its puddle. The strip lights hummed. I was almost at the far end of the corridor, almost done, almost heading back up, when I realized something was different, and it took me a second to figure out what it was, because it wasn't something I could see. It was the hum. The strip light's hum had changed pitch slightly, just slightly, like when a refrigerator compressor kicks on, and the whole hum in the room shifts a half step down. Same sound, basically, but different, lower. And as I stood there paying attention to it, I realized the change wasn't in all the lights. It was coming specifically from the direction of the east service corridor, from the direction of the elevator. I did not go to the east service corridor. I went to the stairs. I went up. I did my radio check and said everything was fine, and I sat in the break room and looked at the clock, and it said 1:49 in the morning, and I thought, 11 minutes. 11 minutes until 2 a.m., and then I just had to get through until 4, and after 4, the rules didn't say anything about the elevator being off limits, and at 4 in the morning, even the worst night is close enough to over that you can breathe again. I made it to 2 a.m. sitting in the break room. I know that sounds like I was hiding, and I was, a little, but I also had legitimate things to do in the break room. I had paperwork to fill out, incident logs, nothing incident-worthy to report, but you still had to fill them out. So I sat there and filled out the log and watched the clock go from 1:59 to 200, and I let out this breath I hadn't totally realized I was holding. And then my radio crackled. Torres from the north end, saying he was heading down to grab something from the supply room on service level 1 and would be off radio for about 10 minutes. I clicked back and said, "Copy that." And then I sat there, and I thought, Torres is going to the supply room. Torres might find the binder. Torres might or might not find the handwritten pages since I'd taken those. But Torres going down there alone at 2 a.m. with no idea about any of this felt wrong in a way I couldn't fully explain. I got up, decided I'd do another patrol loop, swing past the east corridor just to see, just to look, not to use the elevator, just to make sure everything was still the same as it should be. I was being professional. I was being thorough. That's what I told myself. I went down the stairs, service level 1. I turned toward the east service corridor, and I could see the elevator at the far end, the big industrial box of it, and the doors were closed, which was how I'd left them, and the indicator light above the doors showed it was sitting on service level 1, which was this floor, which was where it should be. I walked toward it, slow. Not because I was scared. I was being professional. I walked toward it, and when I got about 15 feet from it, I stopped because I could see in the dim light that something was different from how I remembered it, and it took me a second to figure out what. The elevator doors were closed, but the gate was not. The elevator had these two components, the solid doors that slid shut automatically, and then an inner accordion-style metal gate that you had to pull shut manually when you got in. When I'd last used the elevator, I had absolutely pulled that gate shut. I was sure of it, positive. And now the gate was open about 8 inches, hanging loose, not latched. And through the gap, I could see the elevator interior and the brushed metal walls and the one overhead light inside which was on. I stood there for a while. Long enough that it started to feel stupid just standing there. The gate was open, Maybe Torres had used it earlier in the night before midnight. Maybe Pharaoh had been by during the day shift handover and used it and left the gate open. People leave gates open. It's a thing that happens. It doesn't mean anything. I walked up to it. I was going to pull the gate shut. That was my entire plan. Walk up, pull the gate shut, go back upstairs, do my loop, call it a night. Simple. I reached out and grabbed the gate handle and started to pull it. And that's when the elevator moved. Not a lot. Not like it went anywhere. Just a lurch. A single hard mechanical lurch. Like something had grabbed the cable from below and pulled once and let go. And the whole car shuddered and dropped maybe an inch, and then went still. And I jumped back so hard I hit the wall behind me with my shoulder, and the pain from that was real and immediate, and it grounded me for 1 second. And then the door slid open. Not the gate, the doors. The big outer doors just slid open on their own, smooth and automatic like they do when you've pushed the button. And the interior of the elevator was right there, lit by that one overhead light, and the brushed metal walls were reflecting the interior back at itself and reflecting me. Standing outside it, my face dim and distorted in the metal like a face seen through water. I did not get in. I want to be clear about that. Every part of me said, do not get in that elevator, and I listened to every part of me. But I also didn't run yet, because it was just an elevator that had moved on its own and opened its doors on its own. And those things have electrical issues, mechanical issues. They malfunction. This was an old building with old equipment, and this was probably a mechanical issue. Then it moved again. This time it went up. With me standing outside it and nobody inside it, and no button pushed, it went up. The gate was still open, and the doors were still open, and the whole car just rose, slow and grinding. And I watched it go, and I watched the floor of it rise past my eye level, and then past my head. And then I was looking up at the bottom of it, as it went up to the next level and stopped. And stopped. And I stood there in the corridor, looking up at the shaft where the elevator had just been, and the shaft was dark, and the strip lights were humming their lowered hum. And I thought, very clearly, like a voice in my own head that was calm in a way that scared me more than panic would have. I thought, you need to be somewhere else right now. I turned for the stairs, and I had taken maybe 4 steps when the scratching started. Not from the elevator shaft, from the corridor ahead of me, from the direction I was walking, from the direction of the stairs. And I stopped walking, because Rule 3 said, stop moving, and flatten against the wall, and I did it. I did exactly that. I put my back against the wall to my left, and I cut my flashlight, and I stood in the humming dimness and I listened. The scratching was the same as what I'd heard the night before, and also completely different, because the night before, I'd been in the supply room with a closed door between me and it. And now there was nothing between me and it, except about 30 feet of corridor and darkness. It was low. It was deliberate. It had a rhythm to it that almost sounded like something being dragged, like something heavy being pulled across concrete with pauses. Scrape and pause, scrape and pause. And underneath the scraping there was a wet sound. A thick, wet sound that I have tried many times since to compare to something normal, and I cannot. I cannot make it normal. It was wet, and it was heavy, and it was patient, and it was getting incrementally closer with each scrape. My heart was doing something I didn't know hearts could do, not just pounding. It was like my whole chest was clenching and releasing fast, faster than it should, and I could feel my pulse in my temples and in my hands were shaking, both of them, the one with the flashlight and the one flat against the wall, and I pressed that wall hand harder against the concrete, like the concrete was the only real thing in the world. And maybe it was. 2 minutes. Rule 3 said 2 full minutes after the sound stops. The sound had not stopped. The sound was still going. Scrape and pause and wet and scrape, and the thing making it was somewhere in that dark corridor between me and the stairs, and I was not going to find out what it was, because I was not moving. Except then, the elevator came back down. Above me, in the shaft, I heard the mechanical groan of it dropping back down, slow and grinding, and then the heavy clunk of it settling at this level again, and the doors slid open again behind me, and the light from the interior spilled out into the corridor and reached me where I was standing against the wall, and I was now lit up in that light like a target, and the scraping sound stopped. Complete stop. Same as the night before. There and then, not there. I did not wait 2 minutes. I am not going to pretend I waited 2 minutes. I waited maybe 8 seconds, and then I stepped sideways into the elevator because the elevator was behind me and the stairs were in front of me, and whatever was in front of me had just stopped making noise when the elevator opened, and I was not walking toward a thing that had just stopped making noise to use the stairs. I was not doing that. I got in the elevator. I grabbed the gate and pulled it shut. I hit the button for the concourse level, and while the doors were sliding closed, I looked straight up at the ceiling of the elevator car, and I kept my eyes there, and I did not look at the walls. And I said out loud, to myself or to whatever was in that corridor, or to nobody, I said, do not look at the walls, and the doors finished closing, and the elevator started going up. It rose about half a floor and stopped. Not the concourse level, not any level. Between levels in the shaft, the whole car just stopped moving, and the overhead light flickered twice and held, and I was standing in a stopped elevator between floors with brushed metal walls on 3 sides of me, and I had my eyes on the ceiling, and I was saying under my breath, do not look. Do not look at the walls. Do not look. And the rule came back to me, clear as anything. Rule 4. Do not look at the walls. And then Rule 7 came right behind it. If the reflection blinks when you are not blinking, get off at the next floor. It already knows you saw it. I had not looked. I had not seen the reflection. I was looking at the ceiling, and my neck was starting to hurt from the angle, and my whole body was shaking now, not just my hands, and the elevator was not moving, and the overhead light was steady, and I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I thought about the motel room. I thought about the bad carpet smell and the tiny TV and the 4 walls that were mine for the night, and I wanted to be there more than I have ever wanted to be anywhere in my life. Then I heard it from outside the elevator, from somewhere in the shaft, or in the corridor at whatever half-floor level I was now stuck between. The wet, dragging sound, coming from outside the closed doors, coming closer. And the elevator light flickered again, and in the flicker, just in that half-second of flicker, I saw it in my peripheral vision. My own reflection in the wall to my left. I didn't turn my head to look, but I saw it in the edge of my vision, the way you see things you're not supposed to see. And in that half-second, I saw that the reflection was there. My shape, my outline, dim and distorted in the brushed metal. And it blinked. I had not blinked. So here's the part where I have to tell you what I did in the next, about 4 seconds, because those 4 seconds mattered more than most of the decisions I have made in my entire adult life. And I did not make them calmly or smartly, or with any kind of plan. I made them the way a person makes decisions when their brain has stopped doing the thing brains normally do, where they weigh options and consider outcomes and act reasonably. My brain had left the building. What was left was just the animal part, the old deep part, and the animal part had one thought, and the thought was up. I hit every button on the panel, not just the concourse level button, every single one. I slapped them all with my palm in one sweeping motion, and the panel lit up like a Christmas decoration. And for one terrible second, nothing happened. And the wet, dragging sound outside the doors got closer. Not fast, not rushing, just patient and steady and close. And then the elevator shuddered and lurched and started moving, and I cannot tell you which direction it went first, because I had my eyes shut and my back pressed into the corner and both hands flat on the wall behind me, and I was not looking at anything. It went up. I could feel it going up by the pressure in my knees and the way my stomach dropped slightly. And it went up, and it stopped, and the doors opened, and I went through them before they were even fully open. I squeezed through the gap sideways, and I was out, and I was on the concourse level, and the amber dimmer lights were doing their fish tank thing, and the roll-down gates on the food stands were all shut, and the place was empty and quiet, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. I walked fast, not quite running. Running felt like it would confirm something I wasn't ready to confirm. Like if I ran, then I was admitting that what just happened was real, and I was not fully ready to admit that yet. So I walked fast, the way you walk when you're late for something, and I went down the concourse curve toward the security office, which was a small room tucked behind the main concession area with a door that had an actual lock on it, and a desk, and a monitor bank showing feeds from the security cameras, and a landline phone and a coffee maker. And it was the most official, most normal, most human room in the entire building, and I needed to be in it. I got in. I locked the door. I sat down in the chair in front of the monitor bank, and I put my hands flat on the desk, and I looked at them until they stopped shaking. It took a while, longer than I would like to admit. I was breathing in those short, fast pulls that weren't really doing the job, and I had to consciously slow them down, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The way someone had told me once years ago when I used to get panic attacks in my early 20s before life had beaten enough of the anxiety out of me and replaced it with just general tiredness. The monitors showed the camera feeds, 12 of them on a rotating grid. Concourse, West Wing, exterior parking, loading dock, service level 1 corridor. I watched the service level 1 corridor feed for a long time. It was the one that covered the east service corridor where the elevator was. The feed was dim. The cameras down there weren't great, but I could make out the shape of the corridor and the elevator doors at the far end. And I watched that feed, and the elevator doors were closed, and nothing moved. And after about 10 minutes of watching nothing move, I started to feel the shaking in my hands ease off. Nothing on the feed, nothing moving, just the empty corridor and the closed elevator doors, and the bad camera quality making everything look slightly smeared and gray. I radioed Torres, asked him where he was. He said north end, upper concourse, all quiet. His voice was bored. His voice was the voice of a guy who was having a completely normal, boring night and had no idea what was happening 40 yards below him. And I thought about telling him, and I thought about Rule 1, which said if you have to go below service level 2, tell someone in person, not over the radio. And then I thought about the fact that I had just been below service level 1 and had not told anyone anything, and had used the elevator after midnight, which Rule 2 explicitly said not to do. And I thought, I broke the rules. I broke 2 of the rules, and within the same night, the elevator stopped between floors, and the reflection blinked. And I could not tell if those things were connected or if the rules were just documenting something that happened regardless of what you did, something that was going to happen anyway, something that operated on its own schedule and did not care whether you took the stairs or not. I sat with that for a minute, sat with the idea that maybe the rules were not preventive. Maybe they were just instructions for surviving something that was already inevitable. That was not a comforting thought. The landline on the desk rang, loud in that small room, loud the way landlines always are in quiet spaces, and I grabbed it fast because my nerves were completely shot, and the ringing felt like something going wrong. I said, "Yeah, security." The voice on the other end was a man's voice, calm, measured. He said he was Officer Dale Purcell with the City Police Department, and he was currently stationed outside the north exterior gate doing a routine venue check sweep that was standard protocol for tournament venues during overnight hours. He said he'd been unable to reach anyone on the external contact number and had found the side gate locked, and was there someone who could come verify his credentials and let him do a quick walk of the exterior. I want to tell you exactly how I felt when I heard that voice because it matters. I felt relieved, genuinely, physically relieved in a way that was almost embarrassing, like the sound of another person, a professional, an authority. A cop doing a normal cop thing outside the building was the best sound I had ever heard. My shoulders dropped about 2 inches. My jaw unclenched. I thought, there is a real person out there doing a real job, and the world is still normal, and I just had a bad few minutes, and I am going to go let this officer in and everything is going to be fine. I said, "Sure, give me 5 minutes. I'll come around to the north exterior gate." He said, "Take your time, no rush." Very calm, very steady. The kind of voice that makes you feel like whoever is talking to you has things under control. I stood up, got my jacket, reached for the door handle, and then I stopped. I do not know why I stopped. I have thought about this many times, and I cannot give you a clean reason. It was not one specific thing. It was more like a collection of small things that my brain had been stacking up without telling me, and the stack had gotten tall enough that it finally tipped over. The voice on the phone was very calm, very steady. Pharaoh's voice was calm and steady. Ms. Pitts's voice was calm and steady. Every official voice connected to this building was calm and steady, in a way that was starting to feel less like professionalism and more like something else. Like the calm of something that does not need to rush because it already knows how this ends. And there was something about the way he said, "Take your time, no rush." Because who says that? A cop doing a routine check at 2:30 in the morning at a major tournament venue does not say, "Take your time, no rush." A cop says, "Please come to the gate now, sir. I have a sweep schedule to maintain." A cop is efficient. A cop does not tell you there's no rush. I sat back down. I did not go to the north exterior gate. I pulled the handwritten pages out of my jacket pocket instead. I spread them out on the desk under the monitor light, and I found Rule 8, which I had read in the motel that morning, but had not fully absorbed because in the motel in the daylight, it had seemed like the most fantastical thing in the whole document, and I had kind of skimmed it. Rule 8 said the following, and I am going to be as exact as I can. It said, "The thing in the lower levels can produce sound. It learns voices from the building's audio systems and from recordings. It will use a familiar or authoritative voice over electronic communication to draw you out of a secured area. It has used radio, intercom, and telephone. Do not respond to any voice communication you did not initiate yourself after 2 a.m. If a voice tells you to come to a specific location, do not go." I sat there and read that 3 times. Read it until the words stopped looking like words and started looking like shapes. Do not respond to any voice communication you did not initiate yourself after 2 a.m. And then I looked at the clock on the wall of the security office. It was 2:34 in the morning. The landline rang again. I did not pick it up. I let it ring. 7 rings, and then it stopped. And then after about 30 seconds, it rang again, and I let it ring again, and it stopped again. And then it did not ring a third time, and the silence after it stopped was the loudest silence I have ever sat inside. I went back to the pages. I was not reading them in order anymore. I was scanning, looking for anything that told me more about what this thing was, and where it came from, and how long it had been here. And I found pieces of answers scattered through rules 9 through 14, but the answers only made things worse. Rule 9 was about the logbook. There was apparently a logbook, a real one, an official operational logbook that the building management kept, separate from the Gray Line patrol logs. And Rule 9 said if you find this logbook, read the entries from the first 6 months of the building's operational history. It said the pattern starts there. It said you will see the first reports of missing staff members listed as voluntary departures or terminations, and they are not. They are not voluntary departures. Missing staff. I read those 2 words, and my stomach did something I cannot describe. Missing staff listed as voluntary departures. How many? It didn't say how many. It just said the first 6 months. How many people? How many nights? How many times had someone stood in this corridor, or in that elevator, or against that wall, listening to that scraping sound, and been listed afterward as a voluntary departure? I looked at the monitor showing the service level 1 corridor, still empty. Elevator doors still closed, nothing moving. Rule 11, and I'm skipping 10, because 10 was mostly about the green door, which I had not encountered yet, and I did not want to think about the green door right now. Rule 11 said the rules themselves had been introduced to the official onboarding process in a modified form by building management at some point after the first incidents. And the modification was intentional, and the intention was not to protect the overnight staff. The intention was to keep the overnight staff in the building long enough. Long enough was the phrase it used. Long enough for what? The rule did not say, but it did not need to say it, because I was already understanding what long enough meant, and the understanding was coming up through me like cold water rising. They had given me the laminated card. Pharaoh had given me the laminated card on my 3rd week in. 12 rules. And the first rule on that card, the official one, said stay on your designated patrol route at all times and complete all lower-level checks on schedule. Complete all lower-level checks on schedule. They were sending me down there. On schedule. With a route that took me to the East Corridor. With a rule that said, use the elevator when moving equipment between levels to preserve physical energy for the full shift duration. They had written the elevator into the official rules. They had put me in the elevator. They had set the schedule so that my lower-level checks happened right around the window that the handwritten rules said was the most dangerous. The laminated card was not protecting me. The laminated card was delivering me. And the handwritten rules, the real ones, the ones 3 different people had written in a supply room binder over what might have been years, those were the counter document. Someone on the inside, multiple someones on the inside, had been trying to undo what the official rules were doing, trying to warn the people who came in after them, trying to give them a fighting chance against a system that was designed to feed them to something in the basement that the management of this building had apparently decided was easier to manage by giving it what it wanted than by trying to get rid of it. I thought about Carla Pitts and her calm handshake and her folder of forms and the way she'd asked any problems working alone for extended periods without blinking. I thought about Pharaoh walking the corridors slow and listening like he was listening for something specific, and then stopping, and then handing me the laminated card like it was a lunch menu. I thought about Brent and easy money, and the fact that Brent had done his orientation in 12 minutes and shown me almost nothing about the lower levels specifically, because maybe Brent knew and didn't want to know. Maybe Brent was the kind of person who keeps his head down and doesn't think too hard about where the previous overnight guy went, or why the position was open in the first place. And I thought about the posting on Craigslist between a used treadmill and a no-dishes roommate, competitive hourly, posted there specifically because Craigslist is where you look when you're desperate, when you're broke, when you're sleeping in a truck, when you're the kind of person who is grateful enough to sign forms without reading them and shows up for a 9 p.m. interview without asking too many questions. They were not looking for a security guard. They were looking for someone who needed the money badly enough not to look too hard at what they were signing or where they were being sent. I sat in that chair, and I felt something go through me that was not quite anger and not quite fear, but was somewhere in the middle. Some hot, terrible mix of both. I had been selected, not hired, selected, because I was desperate and alone, and the kind of person that goes missing and gets listed as a voluntary departure, and nobody comes looking too hard. The intercom on the wall clicked on by itself. Same voice, Officer Purcell, still calm, still steady. He said he was still at the north gate and was getting a little concerned about the delay, and asked if everything was all right in there. He said it like someone who was genuinely worried. Warm almost, friendly. And underneath the friendliness was something I could hear now that I hadn't heard the first time. Something flat. Something that did not change pitch, the way a real voice changes pitch when it is actually feeling the words it is saying. A real worried voice has a little rise at the end of the question. This one was level. This one was the sound of something that had learned what a worried voice should sound like, but had not quite gotten the feeling part right. I reached over and I switched the intercom to mute. I did not turn it off. I left it on, but muted, so I could see the indicator light and know if it was transmitting. And then I went back to the pages and I looked for anything, any rule, any note in the margins, anything that told me how to get out. Not how to survive the night, how to actually get out of the building while that thing was somewhere below me. And the people who ran this building were apparently content to let it stay there and keep feeding it its voluntary departures. Rule 17. I found it near the bottom of the last page, written in the third handwriting, the tight, anxious one that I'd started to think of as belonging to whoever had been last in the building before me. Rule 17 said there was a ventilation access panel in the file storage room on sub-level 2. The crawlspace behind it runs above the east service corridor and connects to the exterior mechanical housing on the north face of the building. The panel is behind the third shelving unit from the left. You will need to move the unit. It is heavy, but it moves. The crawlspace is about 2 feet wide. Bring your flashlight. Do not stop moving once you start. Sub-level 2. I had to go back down to sub-level 2 to get out. Back down past the elevator. Back down into the humming and the dark, and the place where the scraping thing was doing whatever it did when it wasn't scraping towards someone. The intercom indicator light pulsed. The voice of Officer Purcell said, "I can hear you in there, buddy. I just want to make sure you're okay. Come on out to the gate. We can talk. Everything's all right. Everything's all right." In that flat level voice that did not know how worry sounded from the inside. I folded the pages carefully and put them back in my jacket. I checked my flashlight. Good battery. Strong beam. I checked my radio. Torres was still on the north end, still bored, still having a completely normal night. I thought about what Rule 1 said. Tell someone in person, not over the radio. I could not get to Torres without crossing ground I did not want to cross. I could not tell anyone in person. I was alone in this security office with a locked door and a muted intercom and a monitor showing an empty corridor and pages in my pocket that had been written by people who were listed somewhere as voluntary departures. I looked at the monitor one more time. Service level 1 corridor. Empty. Elevator doors closed. Nothing moving. I unlocked the security office door, opened it, stepped out into the amber-lit concourse. The building was quiet, and the roll-down gates were all shut, and the fish tank light was doing its thing, and I stood there for just a moment with the door still open behind me, and I thought, this is the part where you decide. Not whether to go back down. I already knew I was going back down, because down was the only way out, and the only way out was through. I was deciding something smaller and more immediate. I was deciding to stop being the person who signs forms without reading them. The person who takes the night shift in the elevator because it says to on the laminated card. The person who is so grateful for the $22 an hour that he doesn't ask what happened to the last guy who needed it this badly. I was done being that person. Starting right now, in this exact moment, standing in the amber light of an empty concourse at 2:51 in the morning, I was done. I went to the stairwell door and I pulled it open, and I started down. The stairwell going down was different from every other time I had used it that night. I do not mean different in any way I can point to. And say, look, that thing was not there before, or that light has changed, or the smell is new. I mean different the way a familiar road is different when you are driving it at night knowing something is wrong with the car. Same road, same turns, same painted lines. But you are not the same person driving it, and so the road is not the same road. Every step down felt like a decision I was making fresh, like my feet were asking permission from the rest of me before they moved, and the rest of me was saying yes, but barely. I had my flashlight out even though the stairwell lights were on, because having it in my hand made me feel slightly less like I was walking into a place I was not going to walk back out of. The beam was good and strong, and I kept it pointed at the stairs in front of me, and I went down past service level 1 without stopping, because service level 1 was not where I needed to go, and stopping anywhere I did not need to stop felt like giving something the opportunity to catch up with me. Sub-level 2. The door at the bottom of the stairwell that led to sub-level 2 had a push-bar handle, same as the supply room door upstairs, and I hit it with both hands and went through, and the smell that came at me was different from service level 1. Service level 1 smelled like concrete and machine oil, and that standing water by the drain. Sub-level 2 smelled like something older, like a room that has been closed for a very long time and has been doing something in the dark all by itself. And the something it has been doing has a smell. Damp. Dense. Like the air itself was heavier down here. Like it had more in it than air should have. The lights were on, but barely. Whatever these fixtures were down here, they were older than the ones on service level 1, and they put out about half the light. These long yellowed strips that hummed a different note from the ones upstairs. Lower, slower, like the hum of something that is not quite sleeping, but is not quite awake either. The corridor stretched ahead of me, and I could see maybe 40 feet before it got too dim to read clearly. And then beyond that, it was just shapes and shadows and the suggestion of a hallway continuing. I checked the rule one more time in my head. File storage room, sub-level 2, third shelving unit from the left, ventilation panel behind it. I had not been to the file storage room. I had not been to most of sub-level 2. but I had the patrol map in my other jacket pocket. The laminated one Pharaoh had given me with the routes on it, and I pulled it out and held my flashlight on it, and found the file storage room marked on the sub-level 2 layout in the far left corner, which meant I needed to go down the main corridor, turn left at the junction, and then follow that branch to the end. Simple, straightforward, A to B. I could do this. I started walking. Not fast, not slow, just steady. And I kept the flashlight in front of me, and I kept my breathing even, and I counted my steps the way someone had told me once that soldiers do to keep their minds occupied when their minds want to go somewhere unhelpful. 1, 2, 3. The corridor was quiet, except for the low humming and the soft sound of my own footsteps on the concrete. And I counted, and I walked, and I made it about 30 feet before I heard it. Not the scraping. Not yet. Something different. Ahead of me, somewhere in the dimness past where my flashlight reached, there was a sound like paper. Like a stack of papers shifting. Or like pages turning very slowly in a room that has no wind. A soft, dry, rhythmic rustling. And then it stopped. And I stood there with my light pointed into the dimness and nothing moved. And after 10 seconds, I started walking again. Because stopping was not the plan. Stopping was not going to get me to that ventilation panel. And if something wanted me to stop moving, it was going to have to do more than rustle paper at me. I got to the junction, turned left. The branch corridor was narrower than the main one, and the fixtures in here were even older, and 2 of them were out completely, so there were gaps in the light. Dark patches maybe 8 or 10 feet wide, where the flashlight was the only thing between me and nothing. I went through the first dark patch and into the next pool of yellow light. And I kept counting, and I kept moving. The file storage room door was exactly where the map said it would be. Metal door, no window this time, just flat gray metal with a handle, and it was closed, but when I tried the handle, it was not locked. And I pushed it open and went in and pulled it mostly shut behind me because I did not want it wide open, and I did not want it fully closed and latched. And I told myself that was a tactical decision, and not because the click of a latch in that silence would have sent me completely over the edge. The file storage room was large, larger than I expected, maybe 30 feet deep and 20 wide, with metal shelving units running the length of it on both sides, and then a cluster of freestanding units in the middle. And on every shelf and in every unit there were boxes. Cardboard banker's boxes, the kind with the lift-off lids, each one labeled in black marker or with a typed label stuck to the front, and there were hundreds of them, maybe more. The room smelled like old paper, and something underneath the paper smell that I chose not to investigate because I had a specific thing to do in here, and I was going to do it and leave. Third shelving unit from the left. I counted from the left wall. 1, the unit right against the wall. 2, the next one. 3, the one after that. And the unit was full of boxes, same as the others, but when I put my flashlight on the wall behind it, I could see the ventilation panel right there. Rectangular, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet. Metal grill cover held in with 4 screws, and behind the grill dark space that went back and to the right. I needed to move the shelving unit. Rule 17 had said it was heavy, and it moves, and both of those things turned out to be exactly true. I grabbed the front edge of it and pulled, and it did not want to come, and I pulled harder, and it scraped across the concrete floor in a short shriek of metal that I felt in every tooth in my head, and I stopped and listened. Nothing. Just the hum. I pulled again, got it another 6 inches, and again, and then there was enough space between the unit and the wall for me to get behind it and reach the panel. The screws on the grill cover were the flathead kind, and I did not have a screwdriver, because I had a radio and a flashlight, and my jacket and the pages and nothing else. And for about 5 seconds, I stood there thinking I had made it all the way down here, and the thing that was going to stop me was 4 flathead screws, which was the most absurd and also most plausible disaster I could imagine. Then I remembered the badge, the gray line badge on the lanyard. The metal clip on the back of it was thin and flat, and when I folded it, I could get enough of an edge on the screw head to turn it. Slowly. It took a long time. My hands were not entirely steady, and the clip kept slipping off, and I had to reset it and breathe and try again. 1 screw, 2, 3. The 4th one was stripped and would not move, and I spent probably 2 minutes on it before I just grabbed the grill and pulled, and the 4th screw gave up its grip, and the whole cover came free, and I was holding it, and the opening was right there. Dark. The crawl space was dark and low, and I could feel cool air coming from somewhere inside it, which meant it was connected to the exterior, which meant Rule 17 was right, which meant this was the way out. I was about to put the grill cover down carefully and quietly when I heard the boxes. Behind me, in the room, a sound like one of the banker's boxes on the shelving units shifting. Just slightly. Just enough to make a sound. I turned with the flashlight and swept it across the room, and everything looked still. All the boxes in their places. Nothing on the floor. Nothing between the units. Nothing standing in the space near the door, which was still pulled almost shut. But I had heard it. I looked at the boxes closest to me. 3rd unit from the left. The boxes on this unit were labeled in that black marker, the handwritten kind, and I was close enough now to read them, and I read them, and I wish I had not. The labels said things like Porter M., hired March and a year, and another one said Gutierrez L., hired October and a different year, and another one said Kim J., hired July. And they were all like that. Every box on this unit. Names and hire dates. Not file categories. Not operational records. Names. Employee names. And hire dates. No end dates. Just when they started. How many boxes? I counted the ones I could see on this unit alone. 8, 9, 10. And there were other units in this room. Dozens of other units with their own boxes, and I did not look at the labels on those because I had already understood what I was looking at, and understanding it more completely was not going to help me get through the ventilation panel any faster. These were not personnel files. These were not in the HR department upstairs. These were down here, in sub-level 2, in a room that was not on the standard patrol route, in boxes labeled with the names of people who had come to this building for a night shift and been listed later as voluntary departures. This was the record of it. This was the proof of it, sitting in cardboard boxes in the dark, organized and labeled and kept. And the keeping of it was the part that made something cold move through me, that I still feel sometimes when I think about it too long. They had kept records. They had organized it. Someone had sat down and written names on boxes and filed them in here. And that was not the behavior of people who were horrified by what was happening in this building. That was the behavior of people who were managing it, maintaining it, keeping it running like any other operational system, with its inputs and its outputs and its filing requirements. I thought of Carla Pitts, her folder of forms, her calm handshake, the confidentiality agreement I had signed without reading. I put my flashlight in my mouth, beam pointed into the crawl space, and I went in head first. The crawl space was exactly 2 feet wide and maybe 3 feet tall, and the floor of it was metal ductwork that shifted slightly under my weight, with a sound I did not love at all, but could not do anything about. I pulled myself forward on my elbows and knees the way you do when you were a kid crawling under something, except this was not a kid thing. This was a grown man in a work jacket with a radio clipped to his belt that kept catching on the sides of the duct, and the flashlight in his mouth making his jaw ache, and the complete dark pressing in on both sides of the beam. I moved. I did not stop. Rule 17 had said, "Do not stop once you start," and I was committed to that rule completely. That rule was the one rule in the whole document I had no ambivalence about whatsoever, and I moved forward, and the duct shifted under me, and the beam from my flashlight showed me about 4 feet ahead, and then nothing, just the curve of the duct going right the way the rule had said it would. I had been in the crawl space for maybe 2 or 3 minutes when I heard the sound from behind me, from the file storage room. From back where the boxes were, not scraping this time, not paper, a sound like the door being pushed fully open, slow, deliberate, and then silence. And then something that was not footsteps, because footsteps have a rhythm and a pattern, and this did not. This was irregular. This was the sound of something moving that did not move the way a person moves. Something heavier in some moments, and then almost silent in others. And it was in the room, and I had left the ventilation panel open behind me. I moved faster. I stopped being careful about the noise the duct made when I shifted, and I just moved. Elbows and knees, flashlight beam bouncing ahead of me, the metal flexing and popping under my weight. And I could hear behind me the sound of the thing in the room getting closer to the opening I had come through. And I thought, it knows. It knew when the reflection blinked. It already knows you saw it. Rule 7. I had broken Rule 4 without meaning to. I had seen the reflection in the elevator wall in my peripheral vision, and it had blinked. And now whatever that meant, it meant the thing knew exactly where I was. It had known since the elevator, and the rules and the running and the file room were all just the path between that moment and this one. The duct curved right, and then almost immediately curved right again, and then I felt the air change. More of it. Moving more. The cool outside air I had felt at the opening was stronger now, and I could smell something I had almost forgotten existed. The smell of actual outdoor air. Open air. The flat diesel and concrete smell of the stadium exterior. And it was the best smell in the world. I moved toward it. The end of the crawl space was another grill cover, but this one was on the exterior, and it was held by 2 screws, and I hit it with both palms as hard as I could in that cramped space, and one screw gave immediately, and the other bent, and the cover swung down on the bent screw like a hinge, and cold air hit my face, and I went through the opening, and I fell about 4 feet onto rough concrete and landed on my hands and knees, and the pain in my palms was sharp and immediate and real, and I knelt there on the concrete for 1 second, breathing the outside air in great shaking pulls. I was on the north face of the building. The exterior mechanical housing, a low, blocky structure attached to the main building, was behind me, and ahead of me was the exterior of the stadium wall, and then the parking lot, and then the road, and then beyond the road, the flat, open ground that went out in every direction under a sky that had that pre-dawn quality. Not light yet, not dark anymore. The sky doing its slow thing of becoming something other than night, and there were stars still out in the west, and I could see them. I got up. My knees were wrong, shaky, and unreliable, and I got up anyway. I looked back at the mechanical housing, and the opening I had come out of was dark, and the grill cover was swinging slightly in the light wind on its one bent screw. I looked at it for 3 seconds, and then I turned, and I walked away from it. And I did not run, because running felt like it would pull something behind me, the way running from a dog pulls the dog. And I walked across the parking lot, and through the gap in the lot perimeter, and onto the road, and I kept walking. I walked about a quarter-mile down the road before I stopped. I stopped because my legs decided they were done making decisions without consulting the rest of me, and I sat down on the curb, and I put my hands on my knees, and I looked up at the sky. The pre-dawn thing was still happening. Slow and indifferent, and completely unconcerned with anything that had occurred in the building behind me. The sky was doing its sky thing, and the stars in the west were doing their star thing, and the air was cold enough that I could see my breath, and I watched my breath for a while. I had the pages still in my jacket pocket. I thought about them sitting there. 19 rules in 3 different handwritings. People who had been in that building before me. People whose names were probably on boxes in that file room. People who had kept adding to the document because they wanted the next person to have a better chance than they'd had. And they had done it, knowing that the official rules, the laminated card from Pharaoh, were designed to put you in the path of the thing, and they had tried to undo that with nothing but a binder and a supply room and notebook paper and whatever time they had left. I thought about Torres. Torres was still in the building, on the north end, upper concourse, doing his bored, normal night. Torres had never been sent to the lower levels on his route, I realized, which was something I had not thought about before. Torres did the north end. I did the south end and the lower levels. They had not selected Torres. They had selected me, broke and alone and grateful and quiet. I took my radio out. I clicked it on. I said, "Torres." He came back almost immediately. Said, "Yeah, what's up?" I said, "Get out of the building right now. Use the nearest exterior door and walk away from it." He said, "What?" And I said, "I am not joking. Torres, get out of the building right now and call the police from outside." He was quiet for a second, and then he said, "Okay, man, you're scaring me." And I said, "Good. Be scared. Get out." He said, "Okay." I don't know if Torres got out. I have thought about that a lot. I never saw him again after that night because I never went back to that building, and I never contacted Greyline, and I never responded to the 3 calls from a number I didn't recognize that came in over the next 2 days. I like to think Torres got out. I like to think he walked out a north exterior door in the pre-dawn and stood in the parking lot, confused and annoyed and completely fine. I choose to believe that. I sat on that curb until it was fully light. Until the sky was the pale, washed-out blue of early morning, and the stars were completely gone, and I could see a gas station about a half-mile down the road with its lights on. Then I got up and I walked to the gas station, and I went in, and the woman behind the counter was not Deb. It was someone I didn't know. And I stood at the counter, and I said, "Can I use your phone?" She looked at me. My jacket was dusty, and my palms were scraped up, and I had been awake all night, and I probably looked like something had happened to me. She said, "Yeah, here," and slid the counter phone over without asking me anything about it. I called my brother. He was in the next county over, and I hadn't talked to him in about 4 months because things between us had been strange since the divorce, and I had been too proud and too tired to fix it. He picked up on the 3rd ring, groggy, and I said, "Hey, it's me." He said, "What time is it?" And I said, "Early." I said, "I need a ride." He was quiet for a second, and then he said, "Where are you?" I told him the cross streets. He said, "Okay, give me 40 minutes." I sat on the curb outside the gas station and waited. The sun came up the rest of the way, and it was ordinary and warm and real, and it hit my face and I let it. I still had the pages in my jacket pocket. I did not throw them away. I have them now. They are in a shoebox in my brother's garage where I stayed for the first 3 weeks after that night, sleeping on his couch, not saying much, eating real food, watching bad television, slowly becoming a person again in the normal way that has nothing to do with basements or metal walls or rules someone wrote in the dark for the next person. I have never told anyone the whole thing until right now, until you. And I am telling you because I think the telling of it matters. I think those 3 people who wrote in that binder were doing something important when they did it. And the important thing was not the rules themselves. The important thing was the refusal to let it be a voluntary departure and nothing else. The refusal to let it be quiet. They wrote it down. They left it where someone might find it. They said, "This is real. This happened. Here is what I know. Here is what might help you." This is me doing the same thing. In a bar. Over a beer. To you. I don't know what was in that building. I don't know how long it had been there, or what the management thought they were getting out of the arrangement, or whether anyone ever looked into the missing employees or found the boxes in the file room. I don't know if the building is still running tournament events, or what happened to Pharaoh or Carla Pitts or Brent with his easy money. I don't know any of that. And I have decided, very deliberately, that I'm not going to find out. Some doors you do not open again once you have gotten through them. Some crawl spaces only go one direction. What I know is this. I was broke and alone, and someone put a job posting where broke and alone people look. And I was grateful enough and scared enough of going back to the truck that I signed things without reading them and went where the laminated card told me to go. And 3 people I never met, and whose names are on boxes in a dark room, wrote down what they knew and put it where I might find it, and it was enough. Barely, but enough. The sun was fully up when my brother pulled into that gas station parking lot in his old Silverado. Same truck he's had for 10 years. And he got out and looked at me for a second, and he did not ask me anything. He just said, "Get in." And I got in. And he drove. And I watched the stadium disappear in the side mirror as we pulled away from that part of town, and I watched it until I couldn't see it anymore. And then I faced forward, and I looked at the road ahead. And that was that. That was that.